This is not a story about courage or heroism. It is not about strength, endurance, or extraordinary people. It is a story about routine, responsibility, and the quiet decisions that are made when there is no one left to ask for advice. The expedition was planned carefully, almost 2 years in advance. On paper, everything looked reliable. The route was known, the equipment was tested, the season was considered acceptable. Similar expeditions had taken place before, and none of them ended in disaster. There were 7 people in total, several scientists responsible for measurements and documentation, a medical doctor, an engineer in charge of equipment and logistics, and the expedition leader, a man with experience who had led more than one group under similar conditions. There was nothing remarkable about this expedition. It was expected to be routine. The first weeks passed without incident. The weather was unstable but predictable. Communication with the base worked. Daily schedules were followed. Work filled most of the time and left room for reflection. Each day looked similar to the previous one, and that repetition created a sense of safety.
The first sign of trouble was easy to ignore. During one of the routine transitions between camps, the expedition leader complained of dizziness. It was not unusual. Fatigue, altitude, dehydration, these were common explanations. The doctor advised rest and observation. No one saw it as a serious problem. Later that day, his condition worsened. He became quiet, unfocused, and eventually collapsed. The doctor worked for hours, using everything available. There was no panic, only trained, methodical actions. Attempts were made to contact the base. There was no response. That night, the weather changed. The wind strengthened rapidly, visibility dropped, and the storm closed in around the camp. Communication never returned. By morning, the expedition leader was dead. There were no dramatic moments and no final instructions. His heart simply failed under the combined pressure of stress and physical exhaustion. The group woke up in a situation none of them had truly prepared for. Officially, the expedition was over. The person responsible for decisions, coordination, and authority was gone. No clear instructions existed for what to do next. For several hours, no one spoke much. People continued performing familiar tasks, but without understanding their purpose anymore. Equipment was checked out of habit.
Notes were written out of routine. The unspoken question remained unanswered. Who was responsible now? The answer did not come through discussion or agreement. It came quietly. The engineer, who until that point had rarely spoken unless necessary, began reorganizing the camp. He did not announce himself as a leader and did not ask for approval. He checked fuel reserves, counted food supplies, inspected equipment, and adjusted the camp layout to reduce heat loss. When asked what he was doing, he answered simply that 3 things mattered now: food, warmth, and movement. He did not explain further. He did not try to convince anyone. He just continued working. Over the next day, others began following his actions, not because he demanded it, but because structure returned. The storm did not end. Days passed with no improvement. Communication never resumed. Waiting no longer made sense. The engineer presented simple calculations: how long the food would last, how temperatures were changing, how far the nearest possible evacuation point might be. Some members of the group disagreed. Some were afraid to move. Others believed rescue might still come. The engineer did not argue emotionally. He repeated the same information calmly and continued preparing.
Eventually, the decision was made to leave. It was not framed as bravery or risk. It was framed as necessity. The journey was slow. Progress was measured in small distances. Every step required effort. One member injured his leg and could no longer move at the same pace. Another began losing orientation and struggled to stay focused. The engineer always walked last. He watched carefully to make sure no one was left behind. He carried more weight than the others and rarely complained. At night, exhaustion replaced conversation. People spoke less and less. Thoughts became short and practical. Eat, move, rest, continue. Fear did not disappear, but it stopped being discussed. When the rescue team finally found them, far more time had passed than expected. The expedition had already been listed as lost. The survivors were exhausted, underweight, and barely functioning, but alive. All 7 survived. The official reports later described the outcome as the result of preparation, discipline, and a favorable sequence of events. The engineer's name was mentioned only briefly. He refused interviews and avoided public attention. After returning home, he left his profession entirely and changed his life in ways that were never fully explained. Years later, one of the participants managed to contact him simply to express gratitude. The conversation was short. When asked how he managed to remain calm during those days, he answered without hesitation that if he had allowed himself to think about consequences or outcomes, they would not have survived. The expedition later became part of training materials and reports, not as a story about a person, but as an example of correct decision-making under pressure. Those who were there understand something the reports do not mention. Circumstances rarely resolve themselves. Sometimes survival depends on someone who does not seek recognition, does not speak loudly, and does not see their actions as heroic. Someone who simply continues doing what needs to be done when everything else stops making sense.